Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
All right, RJ, I think it's been long enough since we've done one of these podcasts to do another one here. Welcome, everybody, to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast, presented by Queen Anne Beer Hall. Here you had a nice little night out there to watch the Firebirds game, RJ.
I did. And of course, true to the beer hall being all about hockey, the Firebirds game on all the TVs,
Nice.
it was certainly there, ready to go if you wanted to watch it, even on the big projector screen, over at the back of the hall. So great place to watch the game. Had a good time.
Yeah, no, it was definitely good. We're going to talk a ton about the Firebirds Game 7 and all the questions and lingering things now there. I was, of course, at the game, can talk about the experience of being there, all that kind of stuff. Some talk about a upcoming Kraken UFA that was kind of going around on 32 Thoughts podcast. So we'll be talking about Carson Soucy and what might be going on there. And then for the main segment later, we will be talking about the fact that, hey, Vegas won the Stanley Cup, right? None of us are happy about that. Sorry for bringing it up, everybody. But they did, and we're going to talk about what that might mean for the Kraken, being the other expansion team, right? Like, in a lot of ways, we are tied to them, whether we like it or not. There's always going to be parallels and that kind of shared history between the two franchises. But first, RJ, before any of that, I wouldn't say you and I are proud individuals, would you?
No, I don't think so.
No, I definitely wouldn't say that. And so that's good, though, because it means we're willing to admit when we make mistakes and when stuff happens.
Oh, certainly.
And last week, we did make a little mistake as we were doing all the, listening to the voicemails and reading tweets from everybody's favorite moments from the Kraken season. We missed some. And so we wanted to make sure we started off this week's podcast with those missed DMs. So RJ, let's dig back into it. Relive the glory of the Kraken season 2 one more time.
Yes, and I've been looking forward to this as a start of the episode, especially with how the Firebirds game went.
Mm-hmm.
Start off with some positivity.
Yep.
And thank you again, everyone who responded and got back to us with some great memories from the season. I'm sorry, Twitter DMs are a difficult one because sometimes it has just like a request and all this stuff. Anyway, but thank you for sending these in. So the first one here from DJ Mine. Favorite memory from this past season, I'm from Provo, Utah, but made the 13-hour drive up to Seattle with the wife to go to our first NHL game versus Anaheim. Having never been to the PNW before, I was blown away by the city and had an amazing time. We bought jerseys, sang Let's Go Kraken with our seat neighbors, and even got the Eberle bobblehead. It was an experience I'll never forget, and I hope to repeat next season. So long drives, Dylan, you know a thing or two about that. Maybe not 13 hours, but love the dedication there.
I'm gonna be driving up to Seattle for DevCamp. That's gonna be 18 hours for me, in like 2 weeks.
Oh, fair enough. Well, hopefully the payoff is as good as it was for DJ Mine here. Glad you got to see a good game. Glad I got to go with the wife and just experience Seattle and what it's like to go to a Kraken home game. I've talked to a lot of people after their first Kraken home game who have traveled in from out of state, from different places, and they're always just blown away by the experience.
Yeah, I mean, the game itself is an incredible experience. That game in particular was pretty good too. Like that's a good game to go to. But yeah, like it's incredible. The atmosphere about it, we've all talked about it. Anybody who's been to a Kraken game at Climate Pledge Arena knows what we're talking about. But it is really truly special and a unique experience. And then also just the Pacific Northwest. It's beautiful. Like there's no way around that, right? And here, coming from Utah, it's not like beautiful nature is foreign, but still it's a different kind of ecosphere, and it's really, really cool when you get up there. Trees, man, like I like seeing trees that are like tall. It's not something we have too much of.
And they're everywhere.
I know. I love driving on the freeways, and they're just lining the freeway.
It would just be nonstop, just trees. Yeah,
I love it. So always love the trips up there. But yes, love all of that. And hey, I'm wondering, at the game, think they saw the hoisting of the colors, RJ?
Probably. Yeah, let's see the Anaheim shirt. Oh, There you go.
All
Ah,
right,
nice.
that wasn't quite as majestic as I was hoping for as I unfurl my banner behind me. It was very
Yeah, so for those of you
anticlimactic.
just on the audio version, yeah, Dylan's banner was kind of tucked away there up by the curtains, and he released it down like those Hoist the Colors banners. I thought it was just as good. I thought it lived up to the Hoist the Colors to the experience there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the friendly support there. You're a good liar, RJ.
All right. Thank you. Not proud, but decent liar maybe.
Yeah. Exactly. Priorities.
All right. So thank you, DJ Mine, for sharing that great memory, getting us started off the right way here on the podcast. And we have another one here.
Mm-hmm.
This one from ViRN. Hey, ECH, thank you for everything you've done to cover the Kraken and create this community. I wasn't around last year and still felt like it was very open and welcoming and willing to educate a newish hockey fan. My personal favorite Kraken memory came at the end of their 8-5 win over the Sharks back in November. For background, my husband is from Boston, and while I'm the sports fan in the household, he is devoted to the cause of trolling me about the success of his sports teams relative to mine. So we were at my in-laws watching that game, and he turns to me and says in this small, slightly surprised and distressed voice, I think I might be a Kraken fan. And despite the Bruins' best efforts this season, he stuck to that, so I finally won one. As a fan of the fundamental silliness of sports, I also need to throw in some appreciation at the 9-8 Kings game, particularly the Sprong goal, the clock weirdness, and the Kings' overtime too many men penalty. I took a break from following sports for a couple years, and that game was a perfect example of what makes them great, even when they aren't exactly good, and why I missed them. ViRN. In my head, by the way, because we've struggled with the pronunciation here. She says, in my head, it's ViRN, but also it's a made-up name bestowed upon me by another podcast, and therefore, however you feel like saying it is fine. So we're in the clear, Dylan.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I mean, look, all right, Boston sports fans, Boston fans, people from Boston, no offense to those of you who are listening, but you also know exactly what I'm talking about. I've known enough of you to know. Yeah, especially when it comes to sports, can be pretty insufferable, not gonna lie. During the course of this last season, I went out on at least one date with 3 different women from Boston, okay? You know how much crud I had to take about the Bruins' success this year when I brought up my job? All right? So, like, I sympathize greatly, okay? That's what I'm trying to get at here. Yeah, it's something, but, look, sounds like coming around, becoming a Kraken fan. It's working. Keep it up. It's all good stuff.
Yes. No, I love hearing stories too about, where it's the significant other or family member or just, somebody, right. That kind of falls in love with the team too. And we've heard a lot of those stories too, where, like one partner will get into the team and the other one will be like, ooh, what is this? And then just completely falls in love with the Kraken too, and becomes a Kraken fan. I love hearing those stories and, the excitement of that game, that 8-5 win over the Sharks. That was an awesome game. That was the one, the one home game that I wasn't able to make it there for because of the Thanksgiving trip and having to travel and everything. And I was really sad to miss it at the time too, scoring 8 goals. I mean, that's, it was an awesome game. And it just felt like one of many with it was in that stretch of just that they were scoring so many goals along that stretch. Like that's going to win people over.
Oh, it absolutely will. And then I also love the shout out for the community and everything. And, you and I do get this a lot, right? Oh, thank you for making this welcoming community and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm not trying to downplay what you and I, RJ, have done for that, but I also do want to shout out everybody who is a part of the community for also being welcoming and helping teach the newer fans, or if you are a newer fan coming in and wanting to learn and engaging and asking questions and learning about it and becoming passionate, because there's plenty of people from both sides of that equation in the community that we see on Discord, we've seen during the post-game lives and everything. But the bottom line is, you and I, RJ, can't make a community. We can provide a space for a community. We can put some general rules in place. Whether we always remember to enforce them or not is a different question. But really, it's the community has to come together, and it takes the engagement from people. It takes everybody wanting to, have that shared space together, wanting to participate, wanting to, have a shared culture with each other around sports. And that's really what sports is. I've talked about that many times before, and I'll probably talk about it during the Firebirds section in just a minute. But I am so proud of everybody, coming together the way that they have, whether it's in the post-game lives, on the Discord, on Twitter, the live meetups, all that kind of stuff. So definitely just want to shout out everybody, because it's not so something you and I did, RJ. It's something that we've all made together.
Yeah, it really is. It takes everybody, right? It's an active thing that people have to contribute to every day, and we see that, all the time. And I can shout out to Viren, a very active member of the community, with the Davy Jones hat, chart that goes shows where it goes to each, like that was awesome. Just the things that people contribute all the time. I love to see it. Now, to close this out, I have another comment that came later after I informed her, like, sorry, we missed this. We'll include it on next week's podcast. And then a question for you, Dylan. So the comment was, it was a great year when handing the team that set the single season wins record their only shutout very justifiably doesn't make the cut. Talking about that episode last week. Can't wait for next year. So that's great. And of course, that is Boston as well. Question for you, Dylan.
Yeah.
Have you been on any second date with any of the three after the first round, after the Bruins were eliminated?
Well, after the Bruins have been eliminated?
Right.
Yes.
Did you gloat? Did you give it right back? Of
course I did. Oh, no. Yes.
Okay.
No, of course I did. No, I have to. Like, come on. I'm not going to put up with that stuff. No, I rub it in as I was always taking those trips to Dallas and everything. Come on. It's great.
Do you have any Florida Panthers merch you could have worn to those dates?
Oh, no,
Probably
I don't. That's weird too. I should have like a Barkov shirt or something. I feel like I feel like that would be appropriate. Or now my boy Kachuk. Get on
there. You
that,
go. All
RJ.
right. Well, some. Yeah, I'll get on that.
Oh man,
I'm the one with the company credit card. Fair enough.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, that's what we needed. That's what our budget needs to be spent on. So, Florida Panthers merch for me when I go out with someone from Boston. We're talking about
on the podcast. It's a business expense.
That's true. Our accountant would back us up on that. All right. So good stuff there. Glad we got around to talking about those, because it is like anytime I get to think back to this past season, it's just fun for me, because it was so much fun, and I assume it is for everybody else as well. And this is something I brought up last night, RJ, to everybody. When the Firebirds game ended, it's now officially next season, right?
Yep. That's the end of the hockey season, end of the calendar. That's the last game pro hockey for the year.
Yeah. So we're into season 3, everybody. Be ready. But it was really cool. We'll go ahead and talk about it. And sorry if I'm all like rambly today, everybody. I got like 4 hours of sleep. I was gone for 12 hours, 7 of which were spent in the car. So it was a lot, but it was really, really cool to be there. Firebirds, unfortunately, RJ, losing Game 7 of the Calder Cup Finals, the AHL Championship, in overtime. Almost making it out of the first overtime too, before, just an unfortunate bounce. Looked like off of maybe someone's shin pad. It was kind of hard to see. I was at ice level. Just out, and backdoor goal. What? Yep.
Now, interesting tidbit. I don't know if you were aware of this at the time, if people were sharing this. Did you know that it was the second Game 7 in the Calder Cup Finals to ever go to overtime?
No, I didn't.
And the last one happened in 1953.
Wow. That's pretty
and
old.
Also, this was the longest one too. The 53 one ended earlier.
All right.
So that was the longest Game 7 overtime in Calder Cup playoff history, or in Calder Cup, final history. Yeah. Sorry, and only the second one, the last happening in 1953. So you're there for something historic. I wasn't sure if that was something that was known in the media circles as you were down in the tunnel, but anyway, just wanted to tell you that.
Yeah. No, everybody was just super on edge because it's Game 7 overtime. There's no room for any other emotion.
You didn't need the historical angle. Yeah, just the Calder Cup's on the line. Yeah.
Yeah. You just know that at any moment something is going to happen, and unfortunately for the Firebirds, the moment happened for the Hershey Bears. Still though, insane, incredible season for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. That was definitely something that wasn't lost on everybody that was there. Just the impact that they made on the valley. I've got examples I can talk about in a second, but the success that they had for a first year team, I think, can't be understated. What that group of guys coming together did, what Dan Bilesman, the rest of the coaching staff was able to do to pull them all together. I mean, absolutely incredible. I mean, there's just so many angles about this that I'm excited to talk about. But the first thing was when Bilesman started his presser about an hour after the game ended last night, RJ, one of the things he talked about, they played 98 games this season, including playoffs.
What?
It's insane. That's crazy. I've never heard of a team having to play so many games. It seems
and
like,
especially with 26 of those games coming in the playoffs.
I know.
I mean, that's just that's unheard of, right? It's the most Calder Cup playoff games that any team has ever played.
Yeah.
And those playoff games wear on you more than a regular season game, certainly. And so to have just gone through that grind and made it to the very end, I mean, there's just something to be said for how incredible that is in itself.
Yeah, no, it really is. And then you also think back to like when the season started. And that was something that I did a lot of yesterday, was thinking back to when I was there for the home opener and the different levels in intensity from the crowd with that. But also, well, real quick, before I get to that, the fact that they started first 21, 22 games on the road this year. Like, forget about just like the wear and tear of the playoff schedule. They were also like road warriors for the first to start the year, because even some of their home games were played up there at CPA or Climate or Kraken Community Iceplex. They were playing home games.
Yeah, I remember going to those early in the season, even when they had their training camp. It was all based out of KCI. It was all up in Seattle, and it was a team that didn't really have a home quite yet. And they were making it work in a bunch of different buildings. Even when they were at quote unquote home in Seattle, it was a bunch of different venues they had to play in.
Yeah.
And that can be a lot on a team. That can be very difficult. We saw with the Kraken how guys were talking about just how difficult it was to have everyone thrown together on a brand new team, on an expansion team, and with COVID going on and everything too. And you saw how much it affected them. Mm-hmm. That was a team that was obviously much better than what their record was, and we saw second season kind of prove that, right? As soon as you don't have that first season, all those problems. But then you have the Firebirds who are dealing with that stuff, maybe even more so because they don't have their home rink yet.
Right.
And it just didn't even maybe it did negatively affect them. Maybe they just would have won all their games otherwise. But, they played right through it. And it's just really impressive what they were able to do. I mean, I remember going out to talk to Riker Evans after one of the games at KCI and going over to the Kraken locker room. And it's just the locker room the refs use for the beer league games. Like that's all it was. Like you just walk across the hallway where I play my beer league games. Like that's that's what they were working with and we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. I remember there was an injured player for the Abbotsford Canucks who just like had to walk through the main lobby of KCI, to get out to where he was treated. Like it's not the ideal setup for a team to start out, but they didn't let it stop them.
No, I thought about it last night, RJ, on the drive back, and I was like, if I was maybe closer to Palm Springs or something like that, I could have covered more games with them. This team deserved to have a book written about them and about what they did this season in their first year in existence, and the success that they had, the way they impacted the culture of the area, what they meant to the area, what they meant to everybody who works for the team, the fact that they helped bring this arena to the place and everything. And then just, the trials and tribulations of this crazy year they had. And then you look at some of the players on the team as it finishes up, and just the year that Joey Daccord had and what he came to mean to the fans. And I'll definitely get to that in a second. But also the journeyman season and ending up there with a Shane Wright. Right, who becomes this like integral bottom six member of their playoff run after his, after playing for like 1,000 teams earlier in the same season in little different pockets of time. Like this team, absolutely deserve to have like a book or a 30 for 30 documentary or something like that. And I wish I'd been around more to be around for more moments and establish more of a relationship with people to try to make something like that happen. Hopefully someone out there did, and they can get it done. But it's a really special group. In so many ways, but one of the biggest ways I think is really what they've brought into that area, that didn't really have professional sports before. And I bring this up also because, it's something that I don't know many people within the Kraken community totally feel, but I do know that there was lots of skepticism outside of that in the hockey world about the idea of bringing, okay, here goes hockey to the desert again. Last time we heard that was the Coyotes, and we all know what's going on there, right? Like this idea of that, with it not being attached to like this oasis like Vegas, right? And so there was lots of stuff like that. And I thought back to the first game I was there for, which was the home opener for Acrisure Arena. And one of the things I talked about in that podcast we did after that was that, hey, look, it was a crowd that was into it and willing to learn, but they weren't familiar with hockey, right? A vast majority of them. And why would they be, right? Living in Palm Springs, living in Coachella Valley. I'm not expecting them to all, know all this stuff about hockey. But that, I sense that there was passion there and everything. It was just going to take a little bit of time for them to, learn the game, learn the guys, get used to all that kind of stuff. And boy, did they. Because going there for the playoff games, RJ, insane atmosphere. Like so intense, so loud, so engaged. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody's understanding it. Like, it was so electric there last night. Like, I don't really know how to put into words how incredible the crowd was last night and how proud they were to have their team. And as Bob Condor covers the Kraken, I know he was down there to cover Game 7, and he had asked Dan Bylsma during the post-game presser, he started off by saying, so you outlasted the Snowbirds. Coach Bylsma said, yeah, but like 80 days, right? Like this isn't, the people from Canada that happen to have their, winter home in Palm Springs. Like this was just the local community, and there was 10,000 of them there, and they were loud, and they were, cheering on their guys. And it's very much their guys. Like they totally have ownership of this team now, and it's really, really cool to see.
Yeah, and it was special to be able to see that in the conference finals. So everyone, they really, like you said, they've taken ownership of that team. They've embraced it. This is our team. And I love that too, when you have hockey that goes into a market where there's really no other pro team sports. I think you saw that in Vegas, where, I mean, you had some others like before Vegas, but nothing that big a scale.
Right.
And everyone just rallies around that. I heard so often from, Vegas people, like, they're not really hockey fans, they're Golden Knights fans.
Mm-hmm.
They just love that team so much. And I think you become hockey fans once you've been a Golden Knights fan for long enough. But I mean, these are Coachella Valley Firebirds fans, and they're locals, and they're getting into the sport. And you could even see it on the broadcast. I just can't imagine being there. I'm just kind of jealous you got to be there. But on the broadcast, even in overtime and these tense moments and everything, every stoppage of play, when they're playing the music in the stoppages, the broadcast did a good job of just like panning to fan shots where they're all on their feet and they're all like rocking to the music every single time. You could tell they're just having a great time. They're, you're seeing some fans that are like super nervous as you would get, but others that are just loving the moment and getting behind their team. I love how many of the fans bring their own signs and have different signs that they make, even like whiteboards. They do their own thing. You don't see that everywhere. It shows just how much they engage with it, and it's smart stuff too. It's individual player stuff that they write. It's I love seeing that this fan base, they have their own personality, and it's really come out.
No, they definitely do. And it's crazy too. Like everybody has their own unique take on like the merch as well. Like that's one thing that's super unique. You don't see the same, like you're not going to see two of the same t-shirt there. Like it's crazy to me. Like everybody has their own unique taste. Some people like the the pink stuff. Some people like the blue when they use the ice blue, and it'll be like an all iced out Firebirds logo and stuff. And like just all the different ways in which they do that. They express themselves using the Firebirds. I think that's super unique. That's not something you see from a lot of other teams in any sport. And so yeah, it's there's so much about it, but just the overall culture that they brought to that local community. I was at Universal Studios, RJ, the other day, and I wore a Kraken shirt. I was with a friend, and I said, all right, I'm gonna wear this Kraken shirt. I guarantee you one person is going to come up and say something to me today, and I'm going to wear it, and I'll be ready to pitch them on ECH if they're not already a fan. Sure enough, waiting in a line, guy behind me, Kraken, is that for the Kraken? I was like, yeah. From Palm Springs, out there with his son to enjoy the theme park, and talked about how awesome it is to have the Firebirds and how much they enjoy going to games together. And his son is 6 and is going to be enrolling, in youth hockey out there next fall. And just it's crazy, and how awesome it's been for this playoff run without the Snowbirds there, so that it can all just be them. Like that was part of the conversation too. And it was a lot of fun to talk about that, and to just communicate with somebody from there and see the passion and the excitement and the happiness that this team has brought him and his son was really, really fun and cool. And then sure enough, that was the one person all day, so I got to flex on what I knew about there. Yeah, it was really, really cool. So the culture that they've brought and the culture that has started up around the Firebirds, it's different than what's around the Kraken, but it shares some of the same themes in the sense that it is all about that team. It's all about supporting those players and having a good time. It's not exclusionary feeling. It's very welcoming to new fans, people who are new to the sport, all that kind of stuff. Everybody's there to welcome you with open arms, as long as you're going to root for the Firebirds. And I think that's really fun, and I'm glad that they've kind of taken on those same elements from the Kraken organization. The other thing, though, that I want to talk about in relation to the fans and everything is the relationship that they developed with Joey Daccord, because we knew that it was a big deal. They've got graphics for Joey whenever he makes a big save. It's clear, everyone shouts Joey and chants Joey's name when he makes a save, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think any one singular moment can encapsulate it the way the ending of the game went. And I don't know that you can totally hear it on the broadcast. I don't know that
You can, actually.
Okay, you can hear it on the broadcast. But the moment the puck goes in and the Hershey Bears have won the final, there's a moment where everybody's just kind of like, like that just happened. But before Hershey can even clear their bench to celebrate, Joey chant took up the entire arena. They were chanting for their goalie, who, yes, had just allowed that game-winning goal, that championship-winning goal, and they were going to let him know that, hey, we love you, we support you no matter what. That doesn't mean anything. You've been incredible for us all year long. And I just can't really remember moments like that, RJ, outside of it's like, the career player who's played 1,200 games for the franchise and it's his last game, so everyone's chanting. But for them to do it and for it to have happened, like I said, so fast, like I was just still processing the play that I had just seen, and everybody had just moved on to, we got to make sure Joey's okay. And for all 10,000 people to just hop on board with that being the singular focus in that moment, I just don't even have words for the emotions that kind of like swept over me seeing that. It was beautiful. That's what it was.
It was beautiful. And I recognized it watching the broadcast. I had to kind of double check because I'm like, I couldn't believe that it was actually happening, that so quickly they were all 10,000 were like right on it like that. Like you said, that's the kind of thing you only maybe see for a decade-long veteran or something in a last game, and it just shows the connection that community has with him, and vice versa. And I was surprised, of course, because you never see that. But also in a way not surprised, because I remember going there for the conference finals and I was curious to see, because that crowd, that fan base, I think we both agree, had clearly leveled up since that first home game.
Yes.
And they had grown so much. And I was eager to see what players they connected with the most. And there are lots of players that fan base loves. They love Cole Lynn, they love Ty Karche. I saw a lot of Karche jerseys there. Even some, the only Kraken jerseys I saw there were Ty Karche jerseys. They were so proud of what he was able to go and accomplish at the NHL level. But far and away, the number one fan favorite was Joey Daccord. You couldn't have gone to that game. You couldn't escape it. If you went to that game, you would know who their favorite player was. It was Joey Daccord. And, to see the fans want to make sure he's okay after allowing that might be the most, disappointing, kind of painful goal that he'll allow his whole career. Just given what the moment is. And it certainly wasn't his fault. You watch the play back, it's not his fault. But that's little consolation for a goalie.
Yes.
You just one got by you one way or another, and how disappointing that can be. But to see the fans come in and just lift him up right away, it was beautiful. I'll use your word for it. There's not a whole lot more you can say.
Yeah, and he obviously felt it. He was very emotional afterwards. But it wasn't just the disappointment at the result or the goal going in. It was also, I would say, there was a lot of appreciation there too, right? And there was a lot of love for those fans as well. I got to imagine that was a very mixed emotional moment for him, to experience that. Like, I just can't even imagine. And then, I was able to be on the ice while the, celebration was going, the handshake line, all of that kind of stuff. I took some video. I'll throw that in on the YouTube video version of the podcast. But, he lined up at the back of the line for the players, for the Firebirds, right in front of Coach Dan, who was then in front of Coach Jess. And while they were going down the handshake line, I took video of the three of them. And it hit me in that moment, like, this is what makes teams successful, and certainly what made the Firebirds successful this season was like kind of this golden trio where you have the goaltender who you can absolutely lean on, and they did, and Joey had an unbelievable postseason, like incredible postseason. The saves he was making even last night, absolutely incredible, what he meant, and not just being a goaltender and all of that, but being that fan favorite and being a player that the community can, attach themselves to or care about, that, helps create that strong fan base that they now have down there. And then you have a coach in Coach Dan Bilesma who runs a very good system. All four lines know what they're doing. They're out there with, purpose. They play a certain way. It's tough to play against. It's unrelenting. They're just crashing on you wave after wave. That's all good, but also the leadership he brings from, his own playing career in the AHL, but also the successes he had as a coach at the NHL level, and the leadership and the ability, as we talk about the turbulent season that they had just with everything going on. I don't know that anybody else could have steered them through all of this and gotten them to the place that they could have been without him. And then you look at someone like Coach Jess, who the name of the game for this team was players like, Riker Evans or Ty Cartier, and what they were able to do as far as developing as the year went on to become special players who are going to go to the NHL this next year, most likely, or certainly for a time anyway, if they don't just outright stay there. And you think about what it takes, especially in a minor league system where you are a feeder team for an NHL club, and you're taking in young players and you're getting them ready for that. And you need to have coaches like her who are great communicators, great teachers, who can help hone their skills, help teach them what to do in certain moments, to play a certain way. And it just kind of struck me like those three individuals and what they were able to do for this team not only led to the success that the Firebirds had this year, but it's going to pay dividends for the Kraken moving forward as well. And we'll get to talk about Joey Daccord and maybe his future with the Kraken in just a second, but I just thought it was really, really special to kind of see the three of them together like that, because I just thought like that's what made this team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I saw that you made a great post on your Instagram about, kind of that three
Yeah.
trio of people and how important they were to the team. And I wholeheartedly agree. You had all the elements you're looking for. Joey Daccord, um, playing the most playoff games of any goalie ever in the Calder Cup playoffs, and playing every second too.
Yeah.
He wasn't yanked for the backup ever in the
Mm-hmm.
playoffs. He played every second that a goalie was out there, for 26 games. And that's a grind. You don't
That's
see that in the
so
regular
much.
season.
No.
You have the rotation,
Yeah.
and to know you can lean on him like that. I mean, Dan Bilesma, what more can you say about the
Yeah.
culture he was able to create? I was lucky enough to be able to see the beginnings of it up in Seattle
Mm-hmm.
with, with how kind of Lucy kept the group, but also the teaching and just setting the groundwork for how you need to work and how you need to play in a system. You could see the early steps of it there, and it just kept progressing. And I mean, Coach Jess, the development, you saw her
Mm-hmm.
at dev camp, at training camp, even working with some of the Kraken players, helping them out,
Mm-hmm.
and the development stories. You mentioned Ty Karchi and Riker Evans. Like, I remember Riker Evans watching those early games. Like, he was really sheltered.
Yep.
He was just kind of getting his feet wet in the AHL. He had never been in that league before, and by the end of it, he's a force to be reckoned with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the best showings by a defenseman in the Calder Cup playoffs history. He was only 3 points off from the all-time record of points by a defenseman in the Calder Cup
Yeah.
playoffs. 3 points off the record for any most points by any rookie of any position, forwards included. He was just a force there at the end, and to progress there. Ty Karchi going from an AHL fourth liner to
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's scoring clutch goals in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That's a solid development team. I'm so excited to see what they can do with
Yeah.
these Kraken draft picks from the past couple of years that'll start coming up through that system.
Mm-hmm.
I want Coach Jess to be able to, take whatever opportunity she needs to, and go spread your wings, and
Mm-hmm.
go try and be a head coach one day if that's what you want to do, whatever. But I do hope she stays with that organization for as long as they can keep her,
Yeah.
because she's just so invaluable.
Yeah. Completely. Completely. All right. So Joey Daccord, RJ. I mean, like we just talked about, right? Like the playoff performance was there. It was incredible. He looked fantastic. The reality of the situation is he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. And, all the stuff that you and I noticed and saw, and everybody watching the Firebirds, other NHL clubs took note too. And so, what does this mean? We know the situation with the Kraken. You have Philip Grubauer. He's going to be there for a while. There's no doubts about that. You got Chris Drieger, who did a fantastic job coming back from the injury he did, going down to the Firebirds, playing meaningful games with them down the stretch. Maybe some rumblings that they're trying to move Drieger's contract. If that's the case, RJ, I gotta think
there have been.
It's because they want to re-sign Joey, and then hopefully Joey would be the backup for the Kraken.
I do think that would be the best reasonable scenario that you're looking at right now. It's going to be a challenge to move the Chris Drieger contract.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the rumblings that they might be looking to move him. My reaction to that as well. Yeah, of course you'd love to be able to move that contract.
Yeah, you've always had that
$3.5
good
million
luck approach.
Yeah, I have. And this was back as he was returning from the injury. We kind of had our debate where I thought he had negative value. You disagreed. Yeah. He ends up being waived. It kind of shows that, yeah, he does have negative value at this point. And just,
no,
it's
it just means he has
right?
no value to other teams.
Okay, he doesn't have positive value. Okay, fair enough, Dylan. All right.
Split the difference.
Anyway,
neither of us are wrong.
Oh, yes, you love to do that.
Yep.
So, but the reality is $3.5 million for a goalie who hasn't played NHL hockey in over a year. It's a long time.
It is.
And one who's still coming off a significant injury. That's a bet that a lot of teams probably aren't willing to make, at least not without a sweetener attached. You can probably take that $3.5 million, go sign a free agent goalie that's going to give you more certainty than what a Chris Drieger does, or make a trade for someone cheaper. So we'll see if Francis is able to move that contract. I'm sure he'd like to, but I just don't know that it's gonna be really possible without attaching more than you'd want, especially with the cap going up only $1 million for next year, with it being 83.5. It's going to be a tight squeeze. So Drieger is kind of a question mark there, but if he is there, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for Joey Daccord. And if you're Joey, I think you have to be looking at first and foremost, where are you going to get the opportunity?
Yep.
Because Joey Daccord, we've said it before, I'll say it again. He should be playing NHL games.
He should.
He's 26 years old. He'll be 27 by the time next season starts. He's proven everything you can possibly prove at the AHL level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any more that you can hope to see there. You know what he is at that level.
Yeah.
He needs to be given a shot in the NHL. And I just think with all the goaltending musical chairs you're going to see this offseason, there's going to be a lot of goalies moved around. And there always is. There's always spots that open up. I have to think there's going to be a team that's going to offer him, certainly a one-way deal.
Yep.
And possibly even multiple years on that deal, depending on how much they believe what he can do. We've seen teams, give goalies like this a chance that have, had limited backup, roles, but done well. And they've got good AHL stats. The one I always think of is Martin Jones, who happens to be a goalie also on the Kraken's roster for now. Where the Sharks brought him in after a very limited stint with the Kings, but after really solid numbers in the AHL. And you just figure, okay, well, he's ready to come up for us. And I mean, they handed him the starting role right away, but there are other teams that might think, okay, he's ready to be part of a tandem for us, and let's give him a shot. And it'll probably be pretty cheap, cost effective. I mean, if you really believe in him, sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal, and you could have a bargain on your hands,
right.
In a year or two. So, we'll see what interest there is around the league for the Kraken, because I've thought about this strategically. If they want to keep him, one thing they could do, and I think the first I saw it too, so proposed, was our buddy Isaac from Deep Sea Hockey. He was suggesting that the Kraken maybe sign Joey Daccord to a 1 year deal, one way, so he's guaranteed the salary at, I think it was like 1.125 or whatever it is, the maximum allowable that you can bury in the minors. And so if Daccord doesn't win the starting job, you basically have him and Drieger fight it out. For the starting job in training camp. If Daccord wins the starting job, you send Drieger down and you have to bury his cap hit, part of his cap hit. But you can bury that same amount that you're paying Daccord. So it's the same cap wise, whatever you choose to do. And if you send Daccord down, then there's no buried penalty. You can bury all that amount in the minors. And so you're dealing with the same cap situation either way. I think that'd be a smart move for the Kraken. I would like to see them maybe try that if possible. If you're Joey Daccord, I don't know that you do that.
I wouldn't do that if I was him. Just like
I wouldn't either.
No, that's too. that's certainly the most team friendly thing, right? But if I'm him after the performance you just had, I mean, look, also I guess I don't know the relationships between him and the organization. I can only look at this from an outside perspective. But I'm taking a guaranteed NHL gig. I don't want to have to go into a training camp and fight it out for a spot. I don't, you know what I mean? Especially because it is going to be like a backup spot, right? Like this isn't, I'm coming in to fight to be the starter. And if I lose, well, I'm still there. And at any time they go down or something happens and I can come back into it. I just wouldn't do that. At 26, you're ready to go. You know what I mean? Like this is it. This is your
27.
Time. Yeah, right. And you just had an incredible postseason run in the AHL level. You looked great in the couple NHL games you got this year. Like you have to maximize this opportunity because it could be your last to make this dream of yours come true. So if I'm him, I don't do that. I say basically like you're signing me to be the NHL backup or I'm going to sign with somebody else, right? Like that's what I'm telling Ron Francis. And I think that it's totally appropriate for him to ask and want that for himself. I think he's deserved it. He's worked really, really hard for it. I would never criticize him for taking that. If you are the Kraken, though, and the team-friendly option is off the table, RJ, I mean, do you just try to bury Chris Drieger's contract and you just tell Joey, look, we'll sign you to whatever it takes and we'll just have that buried cap hit? Do you look at buying out Chris Drieger? Because, this year it's only a $500,000, dead cap hit you got to eat. Next year it'll be 1.5, but the cap should go up more next year, so it maybe isn't so bad. Or do you explore something I think Frank Saravelli had brought up, which is, look, you've got this contract you don't want, and it's kind of for a position you really can't afford to have that contract be taking up a spot. So you trade it for someone else's rough contract, You know what I mean? That you can kind of eat for a year, but it's in a position where you don't have this urgency the way you do with Joey Daccord and needing to free up a spot on the roster for him.
Yeah, I would certainly look into that, especially if you think you could get maybe a somewhat productive player who could still, maybe do something for you. Maybe even a defenseman who's making three and a
That's
half
what I was
million
thinking.
roughly for a year, exactly, and have someone who, look, they probably are not living up to that contract or playing up to that level, but at least they could give you a backup or somebody who, maybe could fill into a spot vacated by Carson Soucy while Riker Evans is getting ready and adjusting to the NHL. Someone who could rotate in there or be some injury depth. I would look for defensemen in that range, someone who can serve as a depth D-man if there was a team interested. I'd be willing to retain maybe a little bit on Drieger in a trade.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have the Kraken have all of their retention slots. They're not going to use all three. I'd be looking to retain maybe some salary to make a deal work, if that's what's necessary. Because I think you want to clear out that goaltending logjam that you have. I think, it's rough for Chris Drieger. We haven't really talked about this from his perspective, but, battling back from that injury. And I don't know that you can go into the season with someone with those injury concerns as a backup and feel good about it if you don't have a Joey Daccord behind him.
Right.
Because then you're looking at the Kraken's goaltending depth chart, and you've got Grubauer, Drieger, and then, is it Ales Stetska? Is he the next guy on the list? I think he is. So I don't really trust that. So yeah, I think Ron Francis, if you're him, you got to be creative about maybe trying to move that contract.
Yeah, I'm just very, very quickly looking at teams that have like cap space who might be interested in having.
And for cap concerns too, I don't think if you're offering Joey the backup job, if you're looking to move Chris Drieger and you're assuring Joey you will have, you'll have the backup job guaranteed. That's yours, one-way deal. I don't think he'd ask for a ton of money. I think again, I can't speak for what he's looking for, but I would imagine if you're a goalie in that situation, if that was me, I would value opportunity way more than money.
Exactly.
And if you're guaranteeing me a backup spot, then yeah, I'll take reasonable money, whatever you're, kind of whatever, the market plays out. Like, I don't think there are any teams that are really going to offer him a ton of money. It's basically opportunity.
Right. No, he's looking somewhere between like, 1.125 or something like that and 1.5 max probably.
Yep.
Right?
That's what I was thinking.
Because that's what a backup goalie, right? Like, that's the most you're going to reasonably pay for a backup goalie usually, because you do have to pay your starter, right? And the Kraken are paying Philip Grubauer. So you're not trying to commit, $11 million in cap space to goaltending. Nobody really wants to do that. And so, yeah, that's the situation there. So, yeah, the Kraken would be in a position, if they were able to move out Chris Drieger's contract, buy it out, whatever it was, they would be in a position to offer Joey, kind of fair market value for what, he's going to get from anybody else. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they play that out. In a lot of ways, it feels like the thing we're waiting on for the Kraken's offseason, doesn't it? Like, more so than kind of anything else, that feels like the domino piece that needs to fall is really Chris Drieger.
Right, because that's going to dictate what they can do cap-wise for, really the rest of the offseason. It's going to be potentially a $3.5 million difference. And that's, aside from Vince Dunn, because I think that's the other big domino, because you need to know what he's going to cost.
Yes.
But even then, I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion that he's probably going to come back. I imagine Ron Francis will get that deal done. This one affects, half of a major position group as far as what the plan is goaltending wise. So I do think that is one of the major dominoes of this offseason where, let's be honest, we might not see a whole lot of movement from the Kraken. Yeah. I'm inclined to agree with you that it's going to be one of the more boring off seasons for them. But this is certainly an interesting situation. And it's tough for Ron Francis and Joey too, where yes, you can talk to the agent, but like Joey's got a Calder Cup run to focus on. He can't be making decisions about his future. And so, and I imagine he's probably not getting on that today. No. You probably want to just at least give it a day to settle. So it's going to be a tight timeline. He's going to have maybe a week, out from now, before, having to really make a decision there before hitting UFA.
Definitely. So it's going to be an interesting one to follow. One of the other things that's been interesting, the Kraken, moved towards the off season, is the talk around Carson Soucy. Now, foregone conclusion for a while now. He wasn't going to be back with the Kraken. I think we've all kind of knew that through most of the season, really. But there's lots of talk about maybe a lot of people wanting him. RJ.
Yes, it seemed like Carson Soucy, there's a lot of demand for him for sure out in the market, and we're seeing that rumored on recent 32 Thoughts podcast. Merrick and Friedman talked about that, talking about a lot of the teams that would be interested in him, and understandably too. We saw how well he played in the playoffs, and a lot of teams look at that. I think maybe it's just media circles, maybe it's other teams, but are less inclined to look at the Kraken during the regular season, and they kind of have a sharper focus during the playoffs. And Soucy really did step up, in my opinion, during the playoffs.
Yeah.
You maybe had 1 or 2 games where the discipline issues kind of reared their head, but otherwise he was just really solid, and was a big reason their defense depth was good enough to move them forward to game 7 of the second round, unexpectedly, I think, to a lot of people. So Soucy going to be a UFA, and teams also just covet that kind of defenseman. Big totally. Defenseman who can play physically, who has a bit of sneaky offensive upside.
Yep. Just move the puck out of your zone. He's really good at that.
Yeah,
that's valuable.
Yes. Yep. So teams are going to look at that, and one of the teams that's been rumored, probably the strongest that I've heard, to go after Carson Soucy is the Vancouver Canucks.
I mean, did we Kraken's... talk Carson Soucy really like Norris caliber moving the puck out of his own zone. You know what I mean? Like paired with a Quinn Hughes, insane. Like sky's the limit.
Oh, could you imagine? Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I can't help but just go into my, grabs popcorn, waits to see what kind of moves the Canucks make this offseason every year. And you see it just like clockwork. The chat, and I don't want to get into red glare territory here, talk about the Canucks too much.
Right.
But every year they manage to convince themselves that they're just a few moves away from getting back into playoff contention. They don't actually need to rebuild. They've done it again this year. You can see it all coming out through the media. They're going to go out and they're going to use the Ekman-Larsson buyout money to go and try and bring in some new players who could get them back into that 8th seed and make the playoffs. And it seems like Carson Soucy might be someone who's on their radar. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I have mixed emotions about it, because in one sense, I love this for Carson Soucy potentially, because there's a lot of demand. So I think there's going to be a bidding war for his services.
He's going to get paid for sure.
And I could totally see the Canucks shelling out a ton of money to sign him. And if that was the case, good for him. Carson should get paid.
Yeah.
Absolutely deserves it going into UFA. And so I could see that happening. I'd be glad for him if they offered that big contract. I mean, they've done it in the past, paying defensemen that, probably more than they're worth at market value. The Tyler Myers contract's almost up. They need someone to replace that, right? So I don't want to go say
I don't know that Carson Soucy would ever do as much damage as Tyler Myers has done to the Canucks.
No, definitely not. And he's not going to get paid that much. But I could see them going like maybe 4.5 on a multi-year deal.
Yeah. It might take that just,
and so I love that
teams are in.
Yeah, I love that for Carson. He'd get to not have to move too far, staying in the Pacific Northwest, getting paid his money. But then I thought about the downside, and I think Carson Soucy, maybe more than any other Kraken player this year, drew the fans' ire at certain times because of maybe the discipline issues, the penalty stuff. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably know all that we're talking about. And I feel like eventually he might just get eaten alive in Vancouver, because we know how the fan base can be. We know how the media there can be. And as soon as the discipline issues come up again, because I think they probably will at some point, he takes a penalty in a crucial point in the game. And B, they realize that they're paying potentially $4.5 million a year for, let's be honest, someone who is a really, really good third pairing defenseman, but not a whole lot better than that. I could see Vancouver turning on him, and I don't like what that would entail.
No, I mean, I don't wish that upon anybody, right? Any player. Like, there's very few. I mean, there's very few guys that I would want to have to go through all that, if any. And certainly Carson Soucy, I don't think has done anything close to deserving it. It would be an unfortunate, fact of life of signing there. I think
Yep.
is the
And you
way to
have to
say
know
it.
it was coming.
You would,
I'm
you
sure
would.
you know how the fans are there and the media is there. You know that when you sign.
Yep.
But it'd be interesting to see if that's something you do. Again, just rumors. It's just talk.
Yeah.
You're going to hear a lot of this stuff as we go into the off season. Just on kind of a slower NHL news week. Just something interesting to talk about.
Yep. And yeah, I think he is going to be one of the more coveted pieces of the off season. Maybe not the day one kind of free agent signing, but like day 2 or 3, I could see, a lot of movement
In
there.
this year's class, I think he might be actually a day one signing.
Yeah, maybe.
You look at the D class, like look at the whole free agency class. Like it
rough.
it is very weak.
It's not good.
Wasn't there a quote from was it a scout or a GM or someone up in it was somebody up in management for a team that gave an anonymous quote like just it bleeping sucks.
It does.
This free agency class.
That. Yeah, no, the Kraken are in a really good spot not having to rely on it, right? The fact that they don't need to go out there and make a free agent signing to reinvigorate the fan base or to find a, cornerstone piece or whatever. The fact that they're like, oh yeah, no, we can just, promote from within. A Ty Cartier here, a Riker Evans there. We only have like 3 open spots to even think about anyway. That's nice. It's a really good year for the Kraken.
Good thing it's not last off season where you're needing to add, you're needing to, bring in a bunch of reinforcements.
No,
they would have forced some bad stuff.
There's no Justin Schultz, veteran puck mover on the back end, and Andre Burakovsky, fresh off winning his 2nd Stanley Cup. He can come in and be that top 6 scorer for you, lead the team in scoring when healthy, all that. Yeah, no. And you can get him on a good deal. That's definitely not happening this year. All right.
Not at all.
So for the last little bit here, RJ, do want to talk about the fact that the Vegas Golden Knights finally ascended to the top of the mountain, RJ, many years after a lot thought that they would. Not important who those people would be, by the way. But they did win the Stanley Cup. Congrats for them. We talked about it on Red Glare. But when it comes to the Kraken, what does this mean for the Kraken, right? They came in, a few years after the Golden Knights did. Same expansion draft setup, same expansion setup. This wasn't like, one of them had the favorable treatment, the other still had to work with 1992 rules and was going to be bad for 20 years. What does this mean for the Kraken? Does it reset expectations? Should everybody be like, all right, if we don't win a cup in 6 years, we're bad? Like, I don't think that, but something along those lines. Like, do you think this does change expectations? Does it change timelines, say, for a Ron Francis?
Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say if they don't win a cup in 6 years, they're bad. But I do think it does shift expectations a little bit. I don't think it shifts anything in the way that Ron Francis is going to approach what he's doing with his team, as it shouldn't. He's not one to let that kind of stuff get to him. But I think, look, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, the Kraken and Golden Knights, whether they like it or not, they're linked. It's a reality of being the 2 most recent expansion franchises, the first 2 to happen with these new expansion draft rules, which are a lot more favorable than the previous expansion draft rules. That's for sure. And especially given the success that the Kraken have had. Look, if the Kraken had the season this past year that we maybe expected them to have at the start of the year, where they got a little bit better, they finished, say, the 9th seed or the 10th seed in the West, and they didn't quite make the playoffs, but they made a decent push and were alive in the last month and, improved moderately. Then I don't know that those expectations necessarily exist. And, you can kind of write Vegas off as just this one-off anomaly and nobody was ready for that expansion draft. But given the Kraken's success this year, I do think you have, some very real parallels there. And you see, and I think a lot of people are realizing that these expansion draft rules, they are a very favorable setup. Yeah. And you are given a good situation just because of mostly, I think, that blank salary cap slate. It was different reasons for, Vegas. Nobody was prepared. Everyone made a bunch of really stupid trades and side deals with them, and they were able to take advantage of things that way. The Kraken, there was a pandemic that led to a flat cap, and so you had a clean cap environment, and so you can make moves like an Oliver Bjorkstrand trade where you have the cap space to do that. You can bring in players like Vince Dunn, Adam Larsson on very reasonable contracts because that cap's not going up, and you're signing all your contracts knowing that, oh, this pandemic has happened and the cap isn't going to be moving, whereas other teams had contracts they signed anticipating the cap would probably be at 100 million by now at least. So very favorable scenario, I think, for both teams. And you look at success too. Through 2 years, through their first 2 seasons, Vegas had won 3 playoff rounds. Through the first 2 seasons, the Kraken have won 2 playoff rounds.
Yeah.
Or sorry, one playoff round. They got to a second round.
Yeah.
1 game away from winning a second one.
Yeah.
And it's not that different. You're seeing a team that through 3 years, could do something even more than that. So I think you're going to start seeing some parallels there. You're going to have those comparisons. I think you should probably try and resist those, with the Cup in 6 timeline. I don't think that's necessarily healthy. One thing I did always respect though about Vegas and particularly Bill Foley was the fact that he was not shy about setting those expectations and saying from the start, Cup in 6, we're going to do this. We have a standard of excellence. Maybe it's, growing up hearing about the stories of the old Raiders and the Al Davis's commitment to excellence and all of that, where you want to have the high standards, where I respect it. But I think the Kraken have never operated that way.
No.
They've never, the clear expectation always was just, we want to make the playoffs every year. We want to make the playoffs. We want to make the playoffs. I think that's a healthy expectation to have.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Dylan, what do you think? I'm kind of rambling at this point.
No, it's fine. It is 2 different styles, right? That both organizations have taken. And there is something to the, kind of more win at all costs, this is what matters approach of a Vegas. I think there's certainly aspects of life where that, is what's rewarded. And that is, what you have to have at times, right? And certainly sports makes sense as one of the fields to have that mentality in. But I also think that there is something to the Kraken where it's like, look, we do want to win. Like that's why we're all here. Nobody's playing the game just to like play hockey and just go home afterwards. Like you want to accomplish something. But for the Kraken organization to really try to put the fans first, put everyone's experience first, and whether that's the players, whether that's management, whether that's media, whether that's the fans, there's always been this emphasis on community, on making sure that everybody who exists in and around the Kraken are taken care of and are having a good time, and their experience with the Kraken is memorable and good. And I think that is something that in the long run will be healthier and sustainable for the franchise maybe than taking the Bill Foley approach, where it can work in the short term and it has driven Vegas to successes, and they do have a Stanley Cup to show for it. Like you can't argue with any of those things, but you do wonder about the way that they have treated players, the way they've treated fan favorite players. Had they not won this cup, what does that look like for that fan base? You know what I mean? Like you play with a lot of fire when you take that approach, and generally in sports we've seen teams that take that approach, there are dark times that go with those highs, whereas I feel like the ones that kind of take the Kraken approach, where you do have ownership making sure everyone's being taken care of and looked after, and making sure that everybody wants to be there and wants to be excited about that team, and understands that none of this happens without fans caring about the team and wanting to build that relationship with them and build the strong community around it. I think those are the ones where you have the lifelong non-jaded fans. And I think that that's a really special thing, and not too many franchises in all of sports can say that. And I think it's something that the Kraken are working towards, and I think that is something that's really special. And it is one of those things that, when you're at the end of your life and you think about all the things that you've done and you think about rooting for a franchise, you don't want to feel jaded about that. You want to be proud of the fact that you were involved in all that and you shared all those moments with that franchise, and that they were all, largely good moments. Yeah, there's always going to be the stuff like losing game sevens, right? Like that just comes with it. But the way that you react to that, the difference between everybody being bummed out last night versus chanting Joey and being all in it together, like that's massive as far as how everybody who was there last night is going to remember that moment. And I think the Kraken organization taking that other approach is good. As for whether or not fans should have the expectation of a cup in 6, all that kind of stuff, I don't know that too many people will. I feel like Kraken fans are already a little different. They're passionate. They're Seattle sports fans. We know what that entails. But I think the fact that year 1 went down the way it went down, the expectation is never going to be like, we absolutely have to win a cup. Would there be disappointment if come year 7 or 8 it didn't materialize and Matty Beniers is now approaching 30 and Shane Wright's close to 30 and all that kind of stuff? Yeah, of course there will be disappointment, but I think that just the relationship that Kraken fans have to the team is very healthy, and it's very supportive, and it's built around just love and excitement for that team and supporting that team. And I just think that that's something that we would never kind of reach that level of everybody being like, you guys didn't try hard enough, or I wish we had behaved differently. I wish we had sold out our goaltender that everybody loved and didn't even tell him he was being traded until he was on a plane somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, Seattle fans are just never gonna be down for that kind of stuff. So I think it's all okay.
Yeah, and you touched on the last point I was going to make, that how important that first season was, as far as kind of setting the tone, not just for expectation, but just general attitude toward the team. Loving the team, win or lose, understanding it's not all about the wins. I think it would have been kind of harmful to the culture of the fans, everything, had they Kraken gone to the cup final in year 1. I really do. I think it was really important to have that first season to just kind of ground everybody. The Vegas didn't have, and as a result, they kind of needed that cup in 6. They really did. If they didn't get that done, it could have been kind of disastrous for everyone. And they're lucky they did get it done. And the last thing too is the cup in 6 and Vegas getting it done, especially, it ignores just how hard it is to win a Stanley Cup.
Oh,
I mean,
totally.
you have franchises that have been 30, 40 years that don't win one, and just because Vegas makes it look easy doesn't mean that it is. And that's one of the reasons I even from back when Vegas came into existence and went to the cup final their first year, and I was still a Sharks fan at that point, and I resented the fact that they made it look easy, because I knew from all my time following a franchise that had tried and couldn't get it done, that it's not easy. And that nothing is guaranteed. You're never guaranteed to climb to the top of that mountain. And I think if you just have the appreciation of that from the start, it's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think, one of the aspects that Vegas did have on its side was having ownership like Bill Foley, who, is going to do the kind of spare no expense, right? I'm going to hire whoever it takes to get us there. I'm going to make sure the facilities are whatever it takes to get us there, all that kind of stuff. And the Kraken have that too, right? I've talked about that before. You've talked about it before. The Kraken very much share that. We talked about it earlier with the Firebirds, and talking about the fact that they went out and they hired a Dan Bylsma to be their head coach for their AHL team. They went out and they hired somebody like Coach Jess to develop players, because she is really good at it, and we've seen that result, right? To set up and build a community in a place like Coachella Valley was a decision that they made, and everything. So I feel like there is a lot of parallels. It just comes down to, almost at the end of the day, do you view like the players and the things around your organization as assets, or do you view them as like people? And I feel like that's kind of where there can be a distinction between these two franchises, where for Vegas, everybody is an asset. And as soon as that asset's value dips below a different asset's value, that other asset's getting brought in. And with the Kraken, while there has to be some of that, right? Like Ron Francis can't make everybody happy. He has to improve the team. We talked about it earlier with Drieger or Carson Soucy, right? Like these are just the realities of it. But just the way you go about doing it, and the way you go about making the people within the organization feel the way the fans feel about the team, the way the fans feel about that relationship between team and player goes a long way. And that is something that, you and I have questioned in the long run. Is this going to, hurt Vegas's abilities to sign free agents? I got to think the way the Kraken, care for their players and the setup that they have for their players, you and I have also talked about. Got to think that's going to help the Kraken in the future in free agency. So I'm really happy with the way
in good times and bad.
Yeah, exactly. Too. Exactly.
Because for Vegas, as soon as you can't pitch, we are basically going to win a Stanley Cup. You are going to be playing for a Stanley Cup. You're going to have a legitimate shot at that every year. Because look, that's not going to be the case every year for a franchise forever. As soon as you can't pitch that anymore, you're gonna have a lot more difficulty bringing players in versus the Kraken. You're able to sign Andre Burakovsky to a long-term deal at a reasonable cap hit, coming off the third worst record in the league, and no assurance that you're going to be necessarily better the next season. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that tells you everything you need to know.
It really does, and I think that the fans see that kind of stuff, and the fans value that stuff. Certainly, I know the people within our community, to kind of go full circle with how we started this podcast, the fans within our community and the greater Kraken community that we've had the pleasure of dealing with very much recognize those things and feel those things. And that's why I don't think there's going to be that same level of expectation for the fan base. As long as, the team is competitive, because everybody does want them to be competitive. As long as they are competitive, and as long as everyone feels like everyone's in it together and we're all taking care of each other, things are going to be all right, right? We've already made so many friendships with so many people that's going to be the lasting thing, I think, for a lot of people within the community, more so than, say, one cup win when it could be 40 before the next one kind of thing.
Yep. Just set how many friendships and great memories in 6.
Yes.
Set a goal.
Yes, go set a goal. Oh man, there we go. All right, so but it's it is what it is. I think it's going to be one of those things we're going to now have to deal with as Kraken fans from the NHL at large. The eyes are going to slowly shift from Vegas to us over the next couple of years, as the moves Vegas have made and the fact that they just have nobody coming through that pipeline of theirs because they've sold them all off, is going to take an effect for them. And as the Kraken continue to get stronger, as they continue to stick with Ron Francis's, a little bit more of a slow burn build plan that we're starting to see the effects of, as we're seeing them develop guys like a Ty Cartier and a Riker Evans, the Kraken are going to be competitive for a while. And I do think there's going to be a time where, the NHL is going to really start looking at us like, okay, you guys, the ones that coming in and doing this, and other fan bases. Boy, you think the Montreal Canadiens fans about just Shane Wright have been rough this year. There's going to come a time where the Kraken are like a legit force, and everybody's going to be saying the same things they did about Vegas of, you guys were just handed the team, blah, 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 blah. And so, I'm not envious of the fact that we're going to have to go through that, RJ, but again, I feel like the Kraken fans, Kraken community, pretty well set up to deal with it.
Yeah, no, I think we should have no problems dealing with that. I trust everyone. Just mentally prepare yourselves for it now.
Yep, exactly. That's I think the ultimate takeaway from Vegas winning the Stanley Cup is now when we go out there and we look good with our good players, that's what we're gonna have to deal with. All right. I think that's it for this week's episode of the Deep Dive. Another shout out to Queen Anne Beer Hall, sponsor of the podcast. Next week on the podcast is going to be all about the draft, because it's going to be a couple days before the draft. So we'll talk about what we want to see maybe from the Kraken as far as what players they could be targeting at 20, maybe even in the second round. Should they be making trades? Should they be moving up? What is Ron Francis's draft day history when it comes to things like that? So it'll really be a draft day primer, and then also a reminder for everyone, we will be live for the first round of the draft. We will be doing a draft night live stream for that first round next a week from today. A week from today, right? It's next Thursday. So or Wednesday. Is it Wednesday?
No, Wednesday. Yeah,
Wednesday. Yeah,
it's Wednesday.
A week from yesterday. So 6 days
not
from
a week
now.
from today. Next Wednesday.
Yes, next Wednesday.
Yes.
We'll be live for the first round. We can all hang out, watch how the draft unfolds, see who's gonna fall to 20. Because after doing that mock draft, RJ, I'm telling you, there's too many good players in this draft. There's just too many. There's going to be multiple really good players for the Kraken to pick at 20. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we get to all see what goes on.
And if you're curious who Dylan thinks it's going to be, check out his mock draft. It's the most viewed 2023 mock draft on YouTube. Go check it out on our YouTube channel. Thank you, by the way, everyone who watched it and commented and all that.
Those of you who haven't already, it feels like everybody in the hockey world already has. Yeah, incredible. I mean, that's you saying that. Most watched mock draft on YouTube. It's wild. It's wild. But boy, do I have the ridiculous comments to prove it.
That's for sure. Yeah. Have fun scrolling through that comment section too.
You know what? It is the best part of having a successful video on YouTube. I'm not going to lie, RJ. The views, the whatever ad revenue, all that kind of stuff is nice. It's the comments. It's the people chiming in, telling you don't know anything, but then saying some ridiculous reason to prove that you don't know anything. I love it. I can't get enough of it. I think it's fantastic. So thanks everybody for joining us for this one. We'll see you all next time. Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons. Absurdly Sane, Alex, Andrew, Anonymous, Ben, Brad, Burnt Creme, Kaylin, Chris, Cody, Connor, Coop, Daryl, Denise, DJ Singletone, Duthin, Eli, Elizabeth, Evan, Habak, Gaby, Gary, Gregory, Jay, Jane, Jeremy, Jessica, Joni, Joseph, Josh, Joshua, Katie, Keegan, Kepler, Kitty B. Kraken,
Leanne, Light, Lonnie, Mark, Maya, Michael, Michelle, Noah, Nori, Nunya, Paige, Paul, Rayanne, Rebecca, Sarah, Scott, C.A. Kraken, Sean B., Sean O., Sergey, Shannon, Shoeshine, Skeletal Tendency, Steve, Steven, Striatic, Hasty Kobold, Team YMIAT, Tank Commander Ty, Wendy, Strife, and Zane. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.